Well, hello, 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 everybody. This is Reverend Karen coming at you. Oh, my lights are a little bright today, aren't they? Let me just turn those puppies down a bit. There we go. Oh, that's so much better. Yes, so much better. So I hope everybody's doing well on this beautiful July 14th of 2024. Today, for this Fearlessly Feral episode, I want to talk about pearls. Yes, pearls. And a little bit about the Bible. Now, I know you're laughing at me. Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about the Bible. Just stick with me here because there's some good stuff in the Bible. You just have to know how to properly translate it. And there's two keys to properly translating the Bible if you're interested in this. Remember that back in the time the Bible was written, they taught in metaphor. So nothing in the Bible was meant literally. It's all a metaphorical story. In addition, today's current English versions of the Bible are at least 4 or 5 translations removed from the original Aramaic that the Bible was written in. So each translation suffered inaccuracies, and each inaccuracy piled upon each other inaccuracy until now we have some major inaccuracies in the Bible. So just remember that when you study the Bible. So now, before we move into pearls, I'm going to give you our introduction. Welcome, welcome, welcome to Fearlessly Feral Living, broadcasting to you from the Woogie Ranch out here in the back 40 of northwestern Nevada, where I'm a half an hour away from the nearest gas station and the nearest grocery store. This is a podcast devoted to using new thought principles to ensure successful, creative living. Fearlessly Feral is a focused ministry of Centers for Spiritual Living and is devoted to the vision of a world in which everyone lives fearlessly feral. In other words, wild and free. We blend spirituality and psychology to work from the inside out to promote successful, wild and free living. Our mission is to provide a strong and unshakable inner foundation that works for long-term successful living. And our purpose is activating inner self-awareness so that we can live unlimited lives. And we do this by talking about spiritual principles in practical ways so they are applicable to everyday living. So, back to pearls. There are 2 sayings in the Bible about pearls. The first one says, "We don't cast pearls before swine." Now, if you're the kind of person that likes to check things out, that's in Matthew chapter 7, verse 6. Translated, what that means is you can't teach wisdom to someone who is unwilling to learn it. Now, here's the kicker with that phrase. It's followed up by the reason why we are told not to cast pearls before swine. It's because they might come back and attack us for it. It says that right in the Bible. And I've got a perfect example of how to explain that to you. The divisiveness that we see in our country right now. We have sides. We've got folks on one side and folks on the other side, and each side wants some very different stuff. Now, I first saw this phenomenon developing in the time leading up to the 2016 election. I was having a real tough time with what I was seeing, and I would tell my husband that we needed to find a different way to communicate with one another because the way we were communicating wasn't working. Basically, we were trying to cast pearls before swine, and the swine they were all attacking one another. It just wasn't working. We've gone way beyond that. We've moved into that place where it's just all attack now. I mean, it's not good. It's not good. I know I've been verbally attacked for voicing my views more times than I can count. It happened just this morning. I had someone call me a liar because I stated a fact that I proved and provided references for, by the way. They said, nope, you're lying. Block, delete. Yes. Calling someone a liar is a verbal attack, by the way. It's verbally abusive. I've seen this happen over and over and over again. And I'm wondering, when did it become okay to verbally abuse or even physically attack people for believing differently than we do? I don't understand that. I still think the best way to solve this is to find a different way to communicate. And my next point about pearls could be a way to get there. So when I was in practitioner studies, we had a huge discussion, several of them, in fact, about how we needed to meet people where they were at. You know, as practitioners, we do wonderful things with people. We work with them to get them, to help them find the level of beliefs, the beliefs that are limiting them in their lives. And then we help them change those beliefs so that they can change their lives. The advice I was being given was that I needed to meet people where they were at in order to successfully work with them. And something about that advice rubbed me the wrong way. I thought then, and I still do to a certain extent, that meeting people where they're at is a sort of enabling, codependent kind of a thing. Now I know that meeting people where they are at is, in some ways, just a modern way of telling us not to cast pearls before swine, because they're not going to hear it, and they might get mad at us and attack. So yeah, in some ways, we have to meet people where they are at, but then what? I mean, do we just continue meeting people where they're at, co-sign their bullshit from here to eternity? I don't think so. Especially not in this teaching, because this teaching is about growth in our lives. And if it's about growth in our lives, then how on earth are we supposed to illuminate and facilitate growth if we're meeting people where they're at all the time? If we never challenge them, if we never challenge ourselves, how do we grow if we're not challenging ourselves? Turns out, like much of a life, there's a balance there. Yes, we have to meet people where they're at, otherwise they won't be able to hear us. Otherwise, we won't be able to communicate. But we have to be able to present some different options. So we meet them where they're at with love and kindness and acceptance. And no, not tolerance, because that implies judgment. We meet them where they're at with love and kindness and acceptance. And we find some common ground. And we find a new way to speak to one another that does not include verbally attacking. And we speak gently. We speak about the common ground we found. We form a relationship of sorts. That's where we begin, one baby step at a time. Now, I'm not perfect at this. I don't know that anybody is. I'm a little better than I was, but I've still got some healing to do. I was feeling dismayed and betrayed and very unsafe by the events in this country. And then that was coupled with some events from my own life, that a whole bunch of changes all piled up on one another, all in the same time frame. And all I wanted to do was hide in a cave. And guess what? COVID came along and gave me the opportunity to hide in my cave. So I did. I did. I met myself where I was at. So we have to know ourselves and know what's going on with us in order to meet ourselves where we're at first. Because I have news for you. If you don't meet yourself where you're at first, you're not going to be able to successfully meet anyone else where they're at. We can't be expected to go out into the world and have good communication with folks who don't think like we do if we haven't met ourselves where we're at, and if we haven't done some of our own healing work. We just can't do that. So it's okay to retreat and do the work necessary. And then when we're ready, we come out ready to have some compassionate communication. When we reach this point where we've done some healing, there's still some stuff going on. Like with me, I'm no longer feeling betrayed. I'm over that. Now I'm just pissed. Some of the time, not all the time anymore. I'm just sad. I'm just grieving. But I'm better than I was. I've made some progress. I met myself where I was at, and I've grown. And I've been able to come out of my cave. Well, when we reach this point where we've still got some activation going on, some feeling stuff going on, we're a bit like oysters. You know, the oysters, they hang out on the ocean floor and they get grains of sand inside. Those grains of sand are like our own upsets. So we get those grains of sand, I call them activation. In other words, we're afraid or mad or sad or angry or dismayed or frustrated or hurt. All those feels. In an oyster, it's a grain of sand. Now, the oyster does not try to get rid of the sand. We can't try to get rid of the feelings. It never works. Instead, we need to be like the oyster. We work through them and we turn them into pearls. Pearls of wisdom and peace and love and compassion. See, when we get those feelings, they're not necessary evils. They're not bad things. They're not things that are there just to make us feel worthless. They're there as invitations, as calls, as reminders, as nudges, as pokes, if you will, sometimes as whacks upside of the head, to tell us that it's time to move on to our next greatest level of being. It's time to create some pearls. So we create those pearls by not denying those feelings, but by working through them. And you know what? When you have a feeling and you allow it to just pass through and you work through it, guess what happens to the feeling? It goes away to be replaced by something better. But if you deny the feeling, it sticks around and it says, I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to get bigger and stronger until you listen to me. But if we listen and we work through it and we glean the knowledge, we make the pearl, then the feeling says, oh, I'm kind of useless around here. I'm going to go away. And it goes away. Once that happens, once we get to a different level, then maybe we can start having compassionate communication with people who don't think like we do. It's just a thought. It's just a thought. Now, there's another thing on pearls in the Bible. We've talked about casting pearls before swine. Now let's talk about the pearl of great price. Bible likes to talk about pearls. Pearls are kind of cool. Anyway, this one's in Matthew chapter 13, verses 44 through 46. And I'll admit it took me a while to get to an understanding of what this section means. But I drew on the pearls of wisdom from many educated and thoughtful and enlightened people in my world to help me work through this and find out what these 2 or 3 passages are about. Here's what it says in the Bible. The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again. And then in his joy, he went and sold all he had and bought that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant looking for fine pearls. When he found one of great value, he went away and sold everything he had and bought it. Now, here's the deal with this. In Science of Mind, we teach that heaven is a state of mind, not a place we go to when we die, if we're all good boys and girls and we've obeyed all the rules. The rules change, by the way. and they're subject to the perception of the individual being presented with said rules, and they're subject to the perception of the individual who created those rules from whatever thing they happen to create them from, like the Bible, which they probably translated inaccurately. You see how this is going? Those kinds of rules don't work because every person has a different set of rules. Every set of rules has been perceived differently. Every set of rules has been translated differently. The key to know whether the rules you believe in are really yours. Well, that's the key. The key is to know whether the rules you believe in are really yours or whether they've been installed by someone else. Because I have news for you. If you're living by rules that have been installed by someone else, sooner or later, you're going to bump up against that and you're going to feel it. And you're going to rebel against it. So it's best to explore who and what you really are and figure out if your values and your beliefs and your morals, your rules are truly yours or whether they belong to someone else. So we get to know ourselves truly and completely. That's why Shakespeare said, "To thine own self be true." It's wisdom. We have to know ourselves because we can't be true to ourselves unless we know ourselves. So heaven as a state of mind is a beautiful thing, but in order to have it, we've got to know ourselves and then live in integrity with who and what we are. So getting to heaven takes some soul searching. And that's the great price that the Bible talks about. We don't just willy-nilly get to heaven. We've got to go within and do some work. We have to explore. We have to retreat. We have to go hide in our caves. We have to do shadow work, and we have to do grief work, and we have to do forgiveness work, and we have to discover what our beliefs and values are, and we have to make a commitment to live in integrity with them. It takes time, it takes discipline, it takes commitment. If you've listened to any of my other podcasts or read any of my writings, you've heard me talk about consistent and persistent spiritual practices. That's the price we get to pay to get to the pearl. We get to know ourselves. We get to be willing to do that work. How many times have you either done this or seen someone else do it? They lose a spouse or a partner, and they immediately jump right into a relationship with someone else. Okay, they're asking for trouble downline because they did not do their grief work. They didn't allow themselves to grieve. And somewhere along the way, they're going to get stuck. We have to pay that price. There's no getting around it, folks. We've got to pay it. We've got to pay it. And then there's that phrase in the Bible that says, "Sell everything we have to buy the pearl." So let's look at that another way. Are we willing to give up a belief that's preventing us from getting that pearl? That's selling everything we have. We've got to be able to look at our beliefs and our ways of thinking. And if they're getting in our way and preventing us from getting the pearl, we have to be willing to change them. Are we willing to do enough work to find out what we believe in the first place and what we think? And are we willing to change those beliefs, which takes some active and conscious work? If they're not getting us peace and joy and contentment and good living, because that's what the kingdom of heaven is all about. It's about peace and joy and contentment and good living. That's the pearl right there. So if we don't have the pearl, are we willing to do what is necessary to get the pearl? And that's why it's a great price, folks, because not many of us are willing to pay it. We are willing to change our thinking. By the way, speaking of the Bible, that word repent in the Bible, you know what it means? Change your thinking. That's what repent means. It means to change your thinking. I'll never forget, I got this big grin, just like now. I got this big grin on my face. Oh, repent means change my thinking. Yeah, I get that. We clean up any messes that are in that dangerous neighborhood of our minds so that we can repopulate the mind, the neighborhood with something good. We gentrify our minds. You know, gentrification in the neighborhoods where they went into old and decrepit and dangerous neighborhoods and they cleaned them up. That's called gentrification. We do that to our minds. And when we are willing to look at ourselves with compassion, that's how we do that. When we go inside and we go into that neighborhood and we look at it with compassion and we say, you know, that's a cool building over there. It just needs a little tender, loving care, some compassion about that stuff that's in our minds. Because guess what? The stuff that's there, it served us really well at some point or another in our lives. It's there for a reason. Just because it's not working right now, it's not letting us get to the pearl now, doesn't mean it didn't let us get to the pearl before. But those are old pearls. They've lost their tarnish. It's time to get some new ones. So we go within, we look at ourselves with compassion, we achieve some clarity about ourselves, we stop blaming anything or anyone else for anything. Because it is only until we do that that we can cease to be a victim, and then we become empowered. We go within and we look at our shadows and we forgive and we cry, and we might even change some of our thinking. God forbid we change our thinking or beliefs. Because when we do that, there sits the kingdom of heaven, just waiting patiently for us to claim it. And when we can do that, then we can go back and start casting some pearls before some of those swine, because we might be more effective now. We might be able to better meet people where they're at because we've met ourselves where we're at. Really, folks, it begins with us. It just does. It begins with us. You know, if I look out at the world with suspicion or with distrust, guess what? I'm going to attract those kinds of people. And if I try to have a common ground and cast some pearls before them, that's not going to work. It begins with me. I have to get myself to a place where I'm looking out at the world with some trust and some belief about the basic goodness of people. And maybe they're acting out in things that don't look so good because they're fearful. Do you begin to see how this stuff works? It all begins within. We got to find them within ourselves, or we have to be like an oyster and create them. So we do that work. We don't resist the change. I was talking with someone the other day, and she said, oh yeah, I know that's the truth about myself. I've always thought that way. And I said, but it's getting in your way. And she said, yeah. I said, well, why don't you change the way you think? Oh, I can't do that. Okay. That's meeting people where they're at, by the way. Okay. We go within, we do our inner work, and we realize it's not about them. You know, there's still some things that are going to bug me. Talk to me about misogyny. For example, tell me that I can't be a minister because I'm a woman and we have a major problem. Tell me you don't want me to do your ceremony of getting married because I'm a woman. You want somebody with that fancy outdoor plumbing. I'm going to have a problem. Tell me that Black lives don't matter and I'm going to have a problem with it. But that problem is first mine. It is mine to deal with. I need to explore why I get so activated by racism and misogyny. And you know what? I have explored it, and I've uncovered some truths about myself. Now I get upset about it, but I don't get full of rage and anger and ew, I don't get blocked up. Mostly I get sad about it today. So I've made progress. I've made progress. I'm able to approach people who think differently than me with compassion and open-mindedness, and maybe be able to listen to them so that they can feel heard. Because you know what? A lot of this stuff that's going on today is because people have not felt heard. This is what spirituality is all about, guys. It's not about meditating on a mountaintop. It's not about going to church every Sunday. It's about this. This is what getting to the kingdom of heaven is all about. This is what living fearlessly feral is all about. It's about being willing to do the shadow work, willing to forgive, willing to be open-minded and compassionate to ourselves and others. It's about paying that great price of being willing to do our own inner work, of generating a pearl from the sand of all those icky feelings that we feel. Did you know that pearls are a metaphor for a person or thing of great rarity and worth? Now, I don't know about you, but I'd love to be a person of great rarity and worth. The cool thing is I already am, and so are you. You are a person of great rarity and worth. But you have to discover that for yourself. It's already there. You just have to uncover it. I've always thought if I ever get another fur ball that's not a rescue that comes with a name, I'm going to name her Pearl. If it's a male fur ball, I don't know what I'm going to do. Maybe name him Pearl as well, because they don't know the difference. The point is, pearls are things of great rarity and worth, and we're already pearls. But we have to get to a point where we can appreciate that and acknowledge it, because they're ours for the taking. We just have to be willing to do the work. So today, I am knowing that everyone listening to this episode is willing and able to work and thus receives all those pearls of great price. I am knowing fearlessly feral living for me and for you. And Fearlessly Feral Living is a focused ministry of centers for spiritual living, and your support is much appreciated and fully tax deductible. And you can support the podcast by listening on Buzzsprout and clicking the little support the podcast button. You can donate at our PayPal page, which you can find on our website at fearlesslyferal.org. All help and support is very much appreciated. And I am knowing fearlessly feral living for me and for you. Thank you very much for listening.